Hello and thanks for joining us. Today we have some exciting insights as I'm joined with some esteemed members of the Trinidad and Tobago Fair Trading Commission. Today I'm joined by Dr. Ronald Ramkissoon, the chairman of the commission, as well as Mr. Bevan Narinesingh, the executive director of the commission. Today the aim of this interview is to dig into some insights of the commission's functions, its powers, its responsibilities, and how it can better serve you and the businesses of this country. As we get into it, I would like Dr. Ramkissoon, if you could introduce yourself a bit more and tell us, firstly, the functions of the Fair Trading Commission, including its mandate, its focus.
My name, as you mentioned, is Ronald Ramkissoon, and I am the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Fair Trading Commission. The commission was established in 2014. And since then, we have been carrying out the requirements of the Fair Trading Act. Our FTC, Fair Trading Commission, is in fact the third commission in the Caribbean region. And in fact, we one of over 100 fair trading commissions all over the world. Our vision is an economy characterized by companies which are trading fairly and which are vigorously competing for the business of consumers in Trinidad and Tobago. Our mission is the protection and maintenance of fair trade in Trinidad and Tobago. And we seek to accomplish that in our day-to-day activities.
All right, so as you mentioned, promoting vigorous business and mention in terms of grasping the customers and earning the customers' purchase, that maintains both promotion of good business among investments and billing of revenue, but also customers get the best possible service and prices.
Yes.
Because businesses are always looking to outdo each other in a healthy way.
Indeed.
Right. It's good insight.
Indeed.
And it's good role of the commission. And as we lean off of that, right, I would like you to give some more insights, as I mentioned just now, how a competitive market can actually be beneficial and how do you promote that competition?
A competitive market is beneficial because it encourages companies to innovate. It encourages companies to be profitable through fair means. In other words, they do not take advantage of size, for example, monopolies. They do not take advantage of consumers or of other businesses in the economy. They remain profitable. The best companies do not need support, unfair support that is, and we expect that that environment created by competition would ensure that we have profitable, viable businesses in Trinidad and Tobago competing with each other to the benefit of consumers and, of course, to other businesses. We try to ensure the environment is as competitive as possible by examining mergers, by approving them where they are found to be in line with the Act. We also advocate for to customers the benefits of a competitive economy, and we do a fair amount of advocacy to ensure that businesses understand what the Fair Trading Act is about and that consumers derive the benefits that the Act expect that they would derive.
Right, so your functions in actually enforcing fair trade in Trinidad and Tobago involves both collaboration and technical aspects with businesses and
Yes.
also consumers understanding where they stand, the importance of pushing that message. It's a collaborative effort.
It is very much a collaborative effort where we work with businesses who are our main stakeholders, if you like.
Yes, of course.
To ensure that that environment remains competitive.
Right. So as you come off of the functions and how you actually enforce it, could you share with us some of the key achievements of the Fair Trading Commission since establishment? You said 2014, correct?
Yes. Prior to the establishment, or I should say to the full proclamation of the Act in 2020, the Act was fully proclaimed in 2020. Prior to that, our focus was on public education and advocacy. And we met with a number of business and consumer organizations, explaining to them what the Act was about and what we were about in Trinidad and Tobago, so that they would understand the benefits to be derived from doing that. The second part of your question?
The achievements, I want to understand.
Yes.
From the inception.
Since then, we have focused a lot, and our stakeholders have cooperated with us, in fact, quite a lot, in that we have had to review a number of mergers and approve, as far as possible, those mergers to the extent that they met the requirements of the law. We have also continued to advocate and to publicly educate businesses and others about what we're about. We have also conducted a number of studies. Our work is in fact based on scientific research, and we make decisions based on the research that we do. So we have been very much involved in studies, in reviews, in training our people to understand what happens in the rest of the world and how other successful FTCs operate. So all in all, we have achieved the kinds of goals which we set for ourselves in our strategic plan, and we continue to push forward in growing from strength to strength and strengthening consumers and ensuring that our stakeholders, primarily businesses, adhere to the Fair Trading Act.
Right. So in that decade and growing of the Commission, the main aim has been to develop and hone the quality of service so that when you execute and you engage with businesses and consumers, you assure the Commission is acting on the highest standard possible.
Exactly.
Research and consultation. Yeah, I think that allows positive interactions with businesses and consumers and executes what you're looking to do.
Indeed.
Right, so thanks,
Indeed.
Dr. Ramkissoon. I want to shift over here to Mr. Narinesingh, who is the Executive Director of the Fair Trading Commission. Similarly to what Mr. Ramkissoon would have done for us, could you introduce yourself in your capacity and touch a bit on the power of the Fair Trading Act itself? What does that mean for the Commission, and what does that mean for consumers and businesses?
Okay, certainly. So my name is Bevan Narinesingh, and I am the Executive Director of the Fair Trading Commission. I've been in this position since November of 2014, and I am responsible for managing the daily operations of the Commission. So to answer your question with respect to the powers, so the powers of the Fair Trading Commission is directly derived from the provisions in the Fair Trading Act. And this includes the power to investigate and enforce the provisions of the Act. So what are we concerned about? We are concerned about investigating anti-competitive practices in Trinidad and Tobago. This includes cartel-type conduct, price fixing, agreements to share markets, bid rigging agreements, as well as abuses by monopolies. So under this piece of legislation, when we investigate, there's a number of penalties that could be imposed against entities that are in violation of the provisions of the Fair Trading Act. These include the possible imposition of fines up to 10% of global turnover for the entity that is found guilty of anti-competitive conduct. So, that could be considerable given some of the entities that operate in Trinidad and Tobago. We can also get an order to prevent a merger from happening if we believe that this is anti-competitive in nature. We can also take action against abuses by monopolies. For instance, we can get an order for a certain type of agreement not to be carried out. We could also have these agreements modified because we have to ensure that consumers as well as stakeholders are protected. So the legislation gives us the power to do this.
So we can clearly see that the Commission is backed by legal standards and focuses.
Yes, certainly. This legislation, as the chairman had mentioned, there are over 100 competition agencies existing all over the world, and their powers are derived directly from their various legislation, such as us. The Fair Trading Act, which gives us this type of power to investigate and enforce.
It seems suitable because you mentioned some of the loopholes, if you would, that businesses can take to abuse and ruin fair trading, fair competition in Trinidad and Tobago. So utilizing law to fight fire with fire, so to speak, and adjust that.
Yes, and of course that is why the legislation is there for. And the implementation of this legislation was, of course, well thought out because it was clear that there's a need to combat anti-competitive practices in the market.
Right, and you mentioned anti-competitive practices at the end there. Could you give us some more insight into that? What does that mean for a business, and how can it negatively affect a consumer? What does the Commission do about such a case?
So our concern, of course, is competition. And we try to protect, promote, and maintain competition in Trinidad and Tobago. As a result, we try to ensure that there are not anti-competitive practices existing in Trinidad and Tobago because there are a number of effects of these anti-competitive practices because they can lead to lower quality of goods and services, less competitors in the market, higher prices for consumers. So we have to ensure that this is not happening. And so the Commission, in its role as an enforcer, but also as an advocate, and as Chair had mentioned, to public education-wise, we would be involved in various efforts to ensure that this is not happening. The idea is to do a lot of public education and advocacy, which we have been doing, but of course, if all else fails, we will take enforcement action because we want to ensure that the consumers and businesses also benefit from a competitive market, which is in accordance with market economy principles.
So the aim is prevention by educating as much people as possible. So
well, initially, but of course we will enforce if we have to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a first step, of course, is to always educate the public on what they can do to protect themselves and show that we are still here to support and execute when it is necessary.
And it's also very important as well. We want to ensure that the public knows that we are here. Yeah. We have various means of communicating with us, and they can reach out to us in the event that they need certain information about the work of the Commission.
Excellent. So as we move on, can the Fair Trading Commission force companies to lower their prices? Because as we talk about all these things of competitive business and assuring consumer goods are of good quality, people will think that price will be a factor. What is your position on that?
Well, under the Fair Trading Act, the Fair Trading Commission does not have the power to force any entity to price in a certain way. What we do, though, is that we closely monitor the market to determine whether high prices are a result of anti-competitive practices.
Right.
And if that is the case, we will investigate and make proper deliberations and a proper decision with respect to that. So, as you would know, that there have been concerns about high prices in Trinidad and Tobago.
Of course.
And when that happens, in terms of certain sectors, we have a very strong investigation team and, of course, a strong legal team as well. When we see these types of conduct, we would do an investigation or we would actually contact the relevant entity to determine whether these prices are a result of market factors or could possibly be anti-competitive in nature.
Right.
So just to indicate that high prices by itself is not anti-competitive. However, high prices could be a result of something that could be anti-competitive, whether it be an agreement between some entities to price fix. It could also be a possible abuse by an entity that has a dominant position, a monopoly position in the market, which under the Fair Trading Act is 40% of the particular market. So if indeed there's an entity that is dominant and it has charging high prices it could be possibly an abuse of the Fair Trading Act on the grounds of being an abuse of monopoly position, but not necessarily just because of the prices. So we have to, as Chair said, any decision that we make is based on scientific evidence. And we have to, of course, give the entity as well an opportunity to explain why these prices may be high, because they may be, of course, because of global supply chain factors and things like that.
So it's not that, because we tend to have a perception that if we think it's high, then it's a bad thing. No, higher prices are never a joy, but you are trying to say that just because it's high doesn't mean it's evil. It's high means there are the factors that contribute to the high prices, and we have to analyze whether those factors are fair, and if they are not fair, you guys will step in and do something about it.
Certainly, and Chair could add to that, but the answer is that our concern is whether high prices are anti-competitive.
Correct. Yeah.
Could be evil because high prices, but definitely the concern is whether it is anti-competitive, and that is what our focus is on.
Yeah, well, I mean, it ties in fair is fair, right? Fair for the business and the consumer, because the business can have high overheads, as you say, change in certain global items, things like that. So you guys step in and analyze things properly before making a decision.
Yeah.
Right. You have some insight, Mr. Ramkissoon?
Yeah. With respect to a general comment, really, we find it important to emphasize that we are not anti-business.
Right.
We are against, or we work against anti-competitive businesses. We understand and appreciate, as an economist myself, that businesses generate revenues, pay taxes, employ people, earn foreign exchange. Hopefully, they should be doing more of that at this time.
Yeah.
We appreciate that, and we want businesses to grow, but not anti-competitive through anti-competitive measures. And we don't support businesses who intend to grow at measures or through measures that take advantage of other companies or that take advantage of consumers.
Correct, yeah.
So we would look into businesses which cross the threshold of 40%, businesses that are in any other way affecting the growth of legitimate businesses or are taking advantage of consumers. That really is our concern. But at the end of the day, we would like more and more businesses. We would like to see small and medium-sized businesses become large and enter into the economy of Trinidad and Tobago and doing all the good things that legitimate businesses do. We support that, and all that we do is in support of the growth of the economy.
Correct. With every piece of insight that you both gave, you can see that it's very pro-business, because it's very important to protect your consumer, because that's where all the investment comes from. And if you were to overprice consistently, you deter consumers, you make them choose cheaper products, you make them don't even feel for the product ever again because of it. So maintaining that price and maintaining that fair competition allows businesses to grow, small businesses to come up as well. Because other small businesses may worry that because of the size of certain organizations, they don't have a place there. But by maintaining the fair trade, they're allowed to grow and enter the market, and consumers remain interested in the products.
Well, this is really a part of what competition seeks to do.
Yeah.
Right? Competition tries to promote an entity trying to specialize and do what it is good at. And that's why we believe that there is room for a lot of small business expansion in Trinidad and Tobago. We are quite aware of economic challenges, but there's also the fact that you, as an entity, could find your niche and find your particular client base, customer base, where you can strive in this market as well too. Because this is how we as a region have thrived in globally, because we don't have the size as some of the other entities, but we are very successful businesses because they have found areas, niches where they can specialize and where they can be globally competitive.
Correct, yeah. Technique has been a focus for us since we don't have the quantity of this, that, and the other. We had to be very smart about it.
Exactly.
Right, so
competition tries to build upon that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what we try to encourage as well in our public advocacy and education work as well too.
Understood. So seeing that the commission has been existing for, like I said, over a decade and has done so much public advocacy, what are some of the key focuses heading into the future for the commission? What can we expect? What can the public expect? What can businesses expect?
Okay, so the Commission is very focused on cooperating with other regulators in Trinidad and Tobago. Under the Fair Trading Act, certain sectors are exempt, but overall, we as a Commission, we are responsible for monitoring competition in Trinidad and Tobago. So because of that, we have to have very close relationships with even the sector regulators. So as we move forward, we will be continuing our collaborative work with entities such as the Regulated Industries Commission, the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, the Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the Central Bank as well too, and of course the Office of Procurement Regulation too. So there's a lot of these entities that exist, and the idea is to increase our collaborative efforts with these agencies. Now, on a global scale now, we are one of over 100 competition agencies existing all over the world. We have a very close relationship with other competition agencies, most notably the competition agencies in the CARICOM region, namely Jamaica, Barbados, as well as Guyana.
Right.
So we will be continuing our efforts with these agencies as well, because our role is to also ensure a competitive market throughout CARICOM as well too.
Correct, yeah.
The government of Trinidad and Tobago has also been negotiating a number of trade agreements as well. Under these agreements, they are normally competition chapters. For instance, we're doing one now with Curacao, we are doing one with Chile, and we have done a number of agreements with Central American countries as well too, all of whom have competition agencies.
Right.
So the idea would be to increase our collaborative efforts with these agencies that exist in those jurisdictions to ensure that there's proper competition when these trade agreements come into place.
Yeah.
So those would be the cooperative and collaborative efforts. Now, in terms of certain areas of the economy in Trinidad and Tobago now, we are very concerned about certain sectors, notably the construction sector, the food and beverage sector, and the pharmaceutical sector. Because of that, we have forged very close relationships with stakeholders in these sectors. The idea is to ensure that there's competitive practices existing in these sectors. So this would be a major focus area as we move forward, particularly in this year.
Yeah.
We'll be monitoring activities and having stakeholder consultations with these stakeholders as well too. The idea, of course, is to also identify potential anti-competitive practices such as cartels, such as abuses of monopoly positions, and we'll also be looking closely at the area of mergers as well too, as we have done since our establishment. So since our establishment, we have dealt with over 40 mergers, and we expect that will continue, because that's a sign of a lot of business activity that is taking place in a jurisdiction, in a country, in an economy.
Yeah.
So we will also be doing a lot of work with respect to that too. So there's a lot of areas that we intend to be focusing on, and we look at 2025 in a very positive light with respect to the continuing work of the Commission.
Correct. And as you mentioned, keyword pop there, because I like to consider the viewer in a case like this. So when you say the term cartel when it comes to anti-competitive measures, what does that look like? Because some people may misconceive that, they may think of it in a typical sense. What does that mean in anti-competitive trade?
Well, cartels occur where there are two or more competitors in a market.
Right.
Where they come to some type of agreement, whether it be formal or informal or inferred from the conduct, where they agree to certain anti-competitive things. So, for instance, to set a certain price, to share a certain market, to boycott a certain supplier, to force a potential competitor from entering into a market. So it could encompass a number of things. And the issue that we try to ensure is that these don't exist in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
This is probably the worst competition offense, so to speak. And these agreements, the mere existence of a cartel is illegal. So you don't even have to show that there are any potential damage to a competitor or to a consumer. The mere fact that a cartel exists is a violation of the Fair Trading Act. Certain other provisions in the Fair Trading Act requires that there be some kind of damage if you want to impose penalties. With a cartel, once that exists, penalties are basically automatic once it is found. So as I mentioned, one of the key areas that we are focusing on is cartels, and more specifically, the detection of these cartels. So we will have to do a lot of continued public education and advocacy to encourage entities to come forward if they believe that that is existing in the market in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, because it does seem like a very easy thing for companies to engage in, opposed to all the others. It's collaborative, it's direct communication. If we have a mutual interest to do this thing, it can be done. So it definitely seems to be highlighted.
Well, that was a big part of our public advocacy before the Fair Trading Act was fully proclaimed in 2020, where we would have met with a number of stakeholders in various business organizations to ensure that this type of conduct was not taking place, even unknowingly. Because we didn't want to cast any aspersions, but we were giving an example of when you have these corporate type meetings, it could be a way to discuss things that you should not be discussing. And for instance, prices, global prices, and what we're going to be doing with respect to that, whether we should coordinate certain responses. And all of that, we try to make clear that that is illegal. You can't be coordinating any type of responses, for instance, with your pricing. For instance, you would say, well, I would take the Port of Spain market, you take the San Fernando market. Any type of agreement like that is illegal under the Fair Trading Act.
Wow.
What I would say is the FTC recognizes that businesses have operated for decades in particular ways without a Fair Trading Act being enforced. So what we do now is to take time, and we have been doing, to explain that some of the practices, whether the cartel-like behavior, whatever, exclusionary in any kind of form, that those practices should be left to the past. We now have a Fair Trading Act, which has been fully proclaimed from 2020, and businesses are encouraged to conform to the provisions of the Act, so that we do some education, we explain why, we indicate what kinds of behaviors of the past will not be allowed now, and that there are penalties for infringing the law, and we are prepared to carry out the law if companies do not conform to the provisions of the Act. So we understand that decades have gone by and companies may not have behaved in the best way. That is, they have been following anti-competitive practices. We encourage them now to desist from it. Otherwise, we are fully empowered to take them to the court through the various processes.
Understood. It's very important that you're empathetic because it's a long time without the commission. Yes. And now the commission is out for about 10 years now. They have to adjust. And you guys have been taking steps to make sure they adjust. And like how Mr. Narinesingh mentioned, collaborations with stuff like the SEC, OPR. Yes. Has that been in a sense where you are reviewing their practices, or you are educating them on what to expect, what to look out for to avoid anti-competitive agreements?
Well, several of them have been doing some of that work in their own field. So the central bank has a regulatory interest and powers for financial institutions. So does the Telecoms Authority, so do the RIC and so on. So they have been playing their role in respect of competition in their particular sector. The Trinidad and Tobago Fair Trading Commission has an interest which encompasses every sector. We have a responsibility to collaborate with them to compare notes, if you like, to see where companies might be trying to play off one regulatory agency over another, things like that, or where they simply don't understand that wherever you are, the Act ensures that you know what anti-competitive behavior is and that you desist from practicing that. I also need to make the point about the fact that Trinidad and Tobago citizens adhere to a market economy. And the best way to ensure that you get the best prices and best products is via competition. We are not about price controls. That has not been, over the last few decades, part of the instrument of managing the economy, but rather it is through competition. It is the best way to ensure that consumers get the best benefits from a competitive environment from the businesses that exist. We also make the point that sometimes businesses themselves would want to have a competitive environment because they do not want to be taken advantage of by companies doing illegal things. So that we have had complaints and we have interest by other businesses, not just consumers, that other businesses, sometimes larger businesses, are taking advantage of smaller businesses. We are going to do our best, as the Act allows, to prevent that from happening.
Right, understood. So it's very beneficial to remain competitive. It has been the recurring theme of the discussion today.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, these smaller businesses are reaching out, understanding where you guys stand in terms of protecting fair competition.
Yes.
Right, very integral to maintain good prices, as was reiterated, and maintain that businesses are not outdoing another in a sly way, so to speak.
Yes.
Right, and I was very excited to hear about the collaboration with every regional, even international fair trading bodies in terms of trade agreements and stuff like that, how you collaborate. Can you give me a bit more insight into that and how the fair trade allows that to be fruitful for Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes. One of the areas that we have emphasized is understanding and appreciation how fair trading commissions operate in other market economies that are more advanced than us. So we have had close collaboration with the US FTC in particular, but as our ED indicated, with regional FTCs who were set up before us, and we attend and associate with other international FTCs. As you know, Trinidad and Tobago attracts foreign direct investment from mainly Europe and the United States, and we see it necessary to stay in contact with these FTCs to monitor what they are doing and how they are regulating companies in their jurisdictions. Having said that, we understand that we are a small, open economy. We're not a large, developed economy, and we're very much aware of that. However, some of the practices we see, or I should say the malpractices we see elsewhere in the world, we keep a close eye on what is happening here. And hopefully, companies here are not following some of those bad practices that they might see taking place in other parts of the world. So we think that in staying in touch with international companies, especially those that come from jurisdictions that we are familiar with, we expect that companies, when they come here, they would observe the Fair Trading rules and the Fair Trading Act of Trinidad and Tobago. And I should say that up to now, we have had that kind of regard and respect and that stakeholder interest. And there is a genuine desire to understand what is required, what is not allowed under the Act, and we are very much going to pursue the education, the advocacy, and stand ready to invoke the penalties wherever they become necessary.
Yes, correct. Because when you do that international collaboration, you have to show now that those new relationships are fair.
Yes.
Because you're dealing with your local items, I know that you reach out, you need to assure that you guys meet. But it's good to hear that the development has been positive thus far.
Certainly.
I expect good things because we expect international standards, as we always say. And it gave me the idea. So we've discussed how fair trade benefits the consumer, its benefits major business, small business. Are there any ways, because I really want to get the entire meat of the benefits of fair trade, are there any other ways that the general public can understand a bit more about the benefits of fair trade outside of just the consumer and the businesses? Are there any other items that affects the economy and the country, whether it be governmental actions, items like that?
Well, in terms of the benefits of fair trade, you would see from the pricing.
Right.
When there's fair trading, there's more competitive pricing. Now, I'll give you an example, not in a sector that we actually regulate, but the telecommunication sector. For years, we only had one mobile provider, TSTT, Mobile, whatever name they went by. But when Digicel came to the market, you saw, because of the increased competition, the quality of service improved, as well as pricing as well too. So before that, TSTT, Mobile could have just imposed any types of prices. But because there's now a competitor, it means that prices have been lowered. And even if situations exist that makes it difficult for prices to be lower, you would see higher quality service. You've also seen that in the cable market as well too, when in terms of to compete, these various companies to compete with Flow and Amplia as well as Digicel, you see that they're offering, bundle packages, more channels in order to get the consumer. So that's ways in which the consumers would benefit. In the alcoholic market, as an example, where you would see much more variety now, more rums, more beers, more these types of things. So it also shows that entities are more willing to look at the interests of the consumer, and they try to adjust to suit. And this is also pursuant to, for instance, the agreements we were mentioning. Because when we have a trade agreement, for instance, it would mean that, for instance, products from these countries will be coming in. And that also means that there are more variety for consumers as well. And we as a commission try to ensure that there are as much variety available, as work with other entities to ensure that these are of high quality. And we also try to encourage innovation. Now, we spoke about the small businesses. We have had sessions with, stakeholder sessions with the SME sector, where we try to encourage them in terms of reporting anti-competitive conduct, but also showing how competition can help in their development and ways in which we see they could use effective competition to enhance themselves. And as we mentioned, the specialty aspect of it. Because I think that this is a way for entities through a competitive local market. If they are competitive here, they can be competitive globally. And that's what we're trying to get, the foreign investment and the increased skill set as well too. So with increased competition, you get better at what you do. You also specialize in areas that you are, you think that you have a specialist skill in. And through that, you can lead to better quality goods and services with the consumer also benefiting.
It's interesting to expand on it like that because it goes from just maintaining good products and services for consumers locally and maintaining stuff like good competition between bigger businesses and smaller businesses, but it helps us be ready for a global scale, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Because it's like practice. We keep mastering, honing in our skills, seeing how we can compete against these several items on the market because, like you mentioned, the alcohol sector, we see dozens and dozens of products, but we've seen them continuously for many years, so it means something must be going well. So it shows that the competition in itself is working.
Yeah. And of course, we also are very cognizant that in an economy like Trinidad and Tobago, there may be certain entities that have large market share. And what we try to emphasize with them is that there are certain duties that comes with this market share, that you cannot exercise your market power in an abusive way, where you make it very extremely difficult for new entities to come into the market. That is why under the Fair Trading Act there's a clear offense of abuse of monopoly power. You cannot be manipulating the conditions of a market that makes it difficult for market entry and also takes advantage of the consumer. So we are there to try to ensure that this does not happen.
Yeah.
If I might emphasize a bit the issue of innovation. So whereas competition ensures lower prices and also give consumers a wider choice of not only alcoholic beverages but other products, Trinidad and Tobago businesses have been criticized for quite some time for not being innovative enough, and that indeed we have not been a very innovative country. It is possible that one reason for that is because companies have been using anti-competitive measures to grow market size or market share. Innovation is another way and a very important, legitimate way to grow your market. That is encouraged, that is something that we promote, and our hope is that the less anti-competitive practices we see, the greater innovation is going to become, and the more we are going to see businesses using that method to grow their market share rather than anti-competitive practices.
Correct, and it sounds very healthy because it always comes back to tying into your niche. When you are innovative, you create a new niche, and when you have that niche, you practically own 100% of that market share.
Certainly.
In a fair way,
Certainly.
right?
But and let's also mention that competition policy does not exist in a vacuum. It complements other policies that would be in place. For instance, business development and trade promotion policies as well too, because it's very key, and investment policies as well, that you have an effective competition regime in place in a jurisdiction. It also encourages more foreign investment as well too, when an investor knows that they have proper systems in place to protect their interests, so to speak, when they if they want to enter into a market. So there's always like a checklist. And of course, having an effective regulatory regime in a country is something that a foreign investor would look at. And this includes having an effective competition regime and an effective fair trading commission.
So now it goes into another thing. Fair trade, it promotes foreign investment. Because once you have a fair market, they'll be more interested in coming here. They won't come to somewhere where they realize they'll be treated unfairly. You know, the investment wouldn't make sense. So we're bringing in foreign investment.
Yes, I think that is very important. Companies would want to know that when they come to Trinidad and Tobago, that the local companies do not have any unfair advantage to them. And that is understandable. They bring whatever, their capital, their technology, and so on. They want to make sure that they would be treated fairly. And you want to ensure that you have an environment that local companies can learn and can grow, and so can foreign companies that contribute to capital development and to economic growth in the country. So you want to have, yes, you want to have that kind of appreciation across the globe, really, as we say.
Yeah, it's excellent. And something came back to mind from what you mentioned it continuously before, that you guys closely observed and you've actually actioned on mergers. What is really a merger review, and how does the commission fit in there?
Okay, so merger review has basically constituted a great deal of the work of the commission. As I had mentioned, and as Chair had mentioned, we did a lot of public advocacy and public education, which has continued. But since the full proclamation of the Act, it is now mandatory for entities to apply for approval for a merger when the total combined assets exceeds 50 million Trinidad and Tobago dollars, and at least one of the entities operates or intends to operate in Trinidad and Tobago. So because of that, we have received a number of applications covering a variety of sectors, you name it. And basically what we have done is that we have set out comprehensive guidelines for these entities to follow in terms of the application process, explaining the transaction, whether there could be potential anti-competitive effects, how would the consumer be affected, how would the economy be affected as well too. So based on that and the guidelines, we do a merger review. Once the application is complete, it goes to the board. Decision is totally that of the board, not the executive director. And we give the entities up to the parties, we give them notice that it's going to be 1 month for us to consider the application once it's considered complete, and for the board to deliberate and make a determination. So in order to approve a merger, we have to satisfy ourselves that the transaction, if approved, will not substantially lessen competition in Trinidad and Tobago or substantially affect the interests of consumers. We are very cognizant of our responsibility with respect to that. So we do a number of consultations during that 1 month period to ensure that this transaction, if approved, would not be detrimental to competition. And then the board will make a determination. And when that determination is made, we will then inform the parties whether we agreed to the approval of this merger, or whether there would be outright non-approval or certain conditions being attached with respect to that. And again, we take that responsibility very seriously, because when an entity merges, oftentimes they have additional market power. So they could become a dominant player. And we have to ensure that if that is happening, we have to ensure that the interests of consumers are not going to be negatively affected. Sometimes they have to make certain representations with respect to pricing, with respect to staff, with respect to the products that they will be offering, to ensure in our minds and satisfy ourselves and the board that this transaction will not have a negative effect on competition and the economy as a whole.
And what stood out to me is that it's not just a yes or no. There's a condition there that, hey, if you guys meet these standards, maybe we can work on this and develop it to assure that it meets the Commission's aims.
Yes, and that is a big part of the application process, where they have to assure us of this. And I must say that the feedback has been very positive. We have gotten a lot of, I don't believe that there's any entity that has merged since our before proclamation of the legislation without consulting us. And that's a testament to our advocacy work pre-proclamation of the Act with the business community, as well as with the legal fraternity as well too. Because I'm an attorney, and we also always try to ensure that the entities that we are advising are following proper provisions and in terms of legislation and compliance obligations as well too. So if, however, we see something that is happening that may fall under our jurisdiction, may constitute a merger, we would immediately, and we have in the past, contacted the entity to ensure that, if this, we heard this in the newspaper, we saw this in social media, but please be aware that the approval of this transaction has to be from the Fair Trading Commission before it can be legally, you can legally go ahead with it. So what I would say to a lot of mergers, the mergers are a reflection, of course, of our economy as well as of a developing economy, as well as there would have been a lot of mergers post-COVID as well too, for various reasons. Like some entities may have been family-owned, and they made a determination that we don't necessarily want to continue in that aspect, and there were some entities that were willing to acquire the company in that instance. But just to go back to what you're saying is that we take this rule very seriously, because it's a major part of the work of the Commission, And in all our advocacy efforts, our public education efforts, we always have suitable slides, so to speak, certain with respect to parts of our presentations where we stress the need to adhere to the provisions and the need to come to us when it relates to acquisitions and mergers.
Right, so it continuously reinforces that you guys are partners of the businesses and consumers, not the enemy.
Well, we could be the enemy if it's anti-competitive.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be, we're always quite clear with that as well.
Yeah.
Let me say as well that the Act applies to both private sector companies as well as to commercial enterprises by the government. In other words, commercial state-owned enterprises are, as well as private companies, fall under the Act. In other words, the Act does not discriminate between state-owned companies that are commercial, operating commercial ventures, or between those and private sector companies. And therefore, we encourage policymakers to ensure as well that the companies that are operated and owned by the government, that they themselves are not taking advantage of consumers or taking advantage of other companies, so that we would have a level playing field for all companies across the board. And we encourage all companies to adhere to the Act, because the Act applies to all commercial companies. So I think it's important that we make that point.
Very, very important point. I'm sure it's a question most people would have. And as we come to a close, I would like some closing statements from both of you. Dr. Ramkissoon, anything else to tie up?
Well, really, we have been established in 2014. We appreciate that this economy has operated in a particular way since independence, and companies have operated in some sense, from what we know, operating and have done some anti-competitive things in the past. What we are doing now is to see Trinidad and Tobago has entered in a particular phase in its economic development, and in this phase, the prevention of anti-competitive behavior by companies is very important. And companies can no longer do some of the anti-competitive things that they might have done in the past. We are prepared to work with companies and any stakeholder in explaining what the Act is about, what it says, what must be done, what cannot be done, what should not be done. And we are open to them writing us, coming to us, calling us to explain what is allowed under the Act and what is not allowed under the Act. So we explain, we encourage companies to desist, and if the Act is not followed, we are then prepared to go to the courts to seek penalties for, if you like, bad behavior.
Thanks, Doctor. Really insightful.
Welcome.
Mr. Narinesingh, any closing statements?
Well, I share everything that the chairman has just elaborated upon. And I just want to stress the need to contact the Commission if there are concerns about anti-competitive practices existing in Trinidad and Tobago. There's no such thing as a bad question, a bad query. We are here to assist. And we are very focused, as I mentioned, on certain key sectors, because we know the effects that these could have on the consumers. And we just want to continue our cooperative and collaborative efforts. So please contact us if necessary.
Thank you very much. So as we close, I'd like to give thanks again to Dr. Ramkissoon, Mr. Narinesingh, for joining us today. This was an insight with the Trinidad and Tobago Fair Trading Commission. We touched on the roles, responsibilities, functions, the mandates, the powers, and the very exciting activities that the Commission is working on heading into the future. So if you'd like to find out more about the Commission, we recommend checking out the website at www.tntftc.com, where you'll get contact numbers, you'll get information, you'll get explanations. Check it out. Thanks for joining us.